I'm like, what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's the doubt for? Live to no end. This is living. The life I've been given is a gift. If I'm a living, I'ma live it to death. So what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's the doubt for? And live to no end. This is living. The life I've been given is a gift. If I'm a living, I'ma live it to death. Yeah.
Welcome everybody to the Living Hope Agency Call. I couldn't be more excited for our special guest here tonight, Mr. Josh Lockhart. Josh is a vice president of Family First Life Gloves Off. He's pretty consistently been, a 30 family a month producer. I think his top month has been 50 plus. So I'm excited to have him on. The last week since Monday, he hit me up on, just the other day. He's like, hey, I've protected over 22 families since Monday, which is fantastic. So I couldn't be more excited to have Josh on the call, man. How you doing?
Hey, man. Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, of course, man. So I think one of the things that we want to talk about tonight is what are the mistakes that top producers make before they consistently become a top producer. So there's a lot of people who come in and they come out the gate strong. I know I came out the gate strong, you came out the gate strong, but it's kind of a roller coaster. And sometimes there's a figure it out stage where, hey, I came out the gate strong, or maybe I came out the gate slow and I'm figuring it out over time. But regardless of what your trajectory is, everybody who is a top producer today, they made mistakes that we could help other people avoid. I've heard from, so many different people. You can either learn from mistakes or you can learn from mentors. And I'd rather learn from a mentor who's already made the mistakes so I can avoid it. Most of the time, you're still going to make mistakes. It's impossible to go through this journey without making mistakes, guys. You're going to fail. This is going to be hard. You're going to get your butt kicked. You're going to get your stomach kicked in. This is commission-based sales. And if you're not ready to fail, you're not ready to make mistakes, then commission-based sales is not the right place for you, let alone insurance sales. So Josh, I'm excited, man. Tell us a little bit about your journey here. Some people, they might not know you. Just quick background and just what the last year and a half or so has been like, and some of the few things that you've learned so far that we can ask a couple questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So spent a bunch of years in direct sales and network marketing. Didn't know that I did not know that in life insurance in general that there was such a thing as leads. And I looked at the industry years and years ago. I stayed away from it because I'm like, I don't want to go knock on doors. My family's not going to buy any life insurance from me. And so when I saw Family First Life and I'm like, oh, high comp leads, just on that alone, I'm like, I have to give this a try. So it's been something like 15 months, just over a year. And I'll be honest, you said it, I came out of the gate swinging. Came out of the gate strong. It was literally like drinking through a fire hose. You have a lot coming at you. You're learning products. You're learning. There's so much to learn, and I'm glad I did it that way. Somebody asked me, "Would you do it different? Would you slow down?" Absolutely not. I probably would have went faster just to get through that first initial phase, where somewhere around the 6 to 9 month mark, things started to not slow down, but I'm like, okay, I got a good handle on this. Right. And so from a personal sales aspect, yeah, we've had some good months, some really, really good months, and the agency's growing, and nearly every month we've either, it's been a stair step, right? Some months it's like we just grew by a tiny bit. Some months we grew by a lot, but like progress is happiness. And I'm so thankful that here we are 15 months later. Life is pretty good and it's getting better. And there's just a lot of things that you learn along the journey. And I would say more so than anything else, like, you come here and you go, okay, I'm going to learn, they're going to teach me some stuff about the products or the phone script. Like, yeah. But more so than anything, you learn about people and you learn about yourself. So I'm 38 years old, spent 15 years around, sales and building teams, and thought I had it all figured out. And I got a cold dose of reality that I don't have it figured out. I thought, hey, I've been around a lot of people, and you see a different side of people, whether it be, from customers to working, with other agents to yourself. You learn what you're good at, you learn your weaknesses. And if you're self-aware enough to admit those weaknesses, you'll get better. So
I love it, man. I think that's a good transition here. So you and I, we had a quick conversation before we jumped on here. One of the first things that you said to me is you said, I wish that agents wouldn't change so many things all at once. So talk to us a little bit about that, because I've totally been the guy who, it's the flavor of the week sometimes when we have so many podcasts and so much information that we can plug into. And I hear this person's doing this and this person's doing that. And they do live transfers and they work this lead and they change their script, and their script is done in 7 seconds, but he does the 6-minute script, but he does it like this and she does it like that. And you start trying things. I remember, I think I was 6 weeks in, and I went from helping 20 plus families in a month to I went like 1 for 27. And Grady's like, dude, what happened? And I was like, well, I was trying this and I was trying that and I was trying that. And Grady's like, dude, stop trying stuff. Like you gotta be yourself and stop trying to be somebody else. So that's the conclusion I came to. I'd love to hear what you have come to when it comes to all the people who they try so many things.
Well, yeah. So you have the people who haven't figured it out. And what I mean by that is they're not running 30 appointments a week. They're not, helping 10 families a week or more. And if you're part-time, that's okay. But my point is, like, if that's your goal and you're not there yet, then the one thing that you should do is just, figure out what you need to do to 30 appointments and that whole thing, right? Like you shouldn't change anything until you figure that out. And then you have the folks that you've done that before. And that's where I was, right? We pretty consistently, going out and doing my 30 appointments a week, helping 10 families a week plus, really, really consistently, having some good months. And, you get so eager to get to the next level, and, you play the comparison game, which they say not to do. And I think some comparison's good. I'm definitely guilty of it, but, want to get to the next level. So again, yeah, you get on a training call, you watch a video and you say, oh, Mike Curry's doing it this way. Let me try that. Well, or his script's different, so let me say the words that he says. Well, we all, after we've been around a little bit, that it's not necessarily the actual words you say, it's how you say it, and you look at a guy like Mike, and I'm just picking on him because he's here, right? He's got a really short script. He's really casual in his speech about it, right? Where some people, they read every word on the script. He's not. Well, why is that? Well, he's confident. He's done this hundreds of times, so he can have the confidence in doing that. But what you end up doing is every week, every time you try, oh, hey, I'm in home, let me try telesales. I'm doing this script, let me try that script. Let me try this. And what you end up doing every time you make a major change in your business, your production drops every time, bar none, because you're almost starting over again. And I dealt with that. I definitely did. We can talk about that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it. Keep going, man.
Yeah. So, I was running 100% in home, and changed a few things changed up a few things. I used a dialer for a little bit, then I wasn't using a dialer. And then, everybody started doing telesales, right? And, you see somebody and they're producing, XYZ more than you are. So you go, well, it must be because they're doing telesales, right? So then you try that. And, I went through a period of time where I jumped from 100% in the home, everything feels good, to like, hey, let me do telesales. And, it just, for many reasons, that flowed at work. It wasn't that all of a sudden I forgot how to sell insurance. It's, you're in a different element. Maybe you have kids at home. That's an element of it. Maybe, I like this analogy. So who here, the people I can see, don't make me feel by myself. If you ever try to go on a diet or eat healthy, right? I like sweets. Maybe your thing is salt, right? Chips or something. I tell my wife, if we're eating healthy, get the cookies out of the house. I do not have the willpower to have the cookies next to me and not eat them. Some people have that kind of willpower. I don't. I have to get the cookies out of the house, right? And so I don't know if you're a cookies in the house or cookies out of the house, or if that even makes sense or not. So my point is, like, doing telesales, there's all kinds of distractions at the house, right? So for me, there's the kids. They want to come in and daddy play with me, and they're cute, and they're, that. So that's a part of it. There's agent calls, right? So if you're doing one call, one closes, every time an agent calls you and you want to take their call, you have to stop doing one call, one closes. So you have to reset. And let's be real with it, right? You think, well, I'll just get back on the phone and start dialing again. But you got to run and take a bathroom break, and maybe, you haven't eaten. So I'll stop and eat, and then somebody else calls you, and maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's 20 minutes before you get back on. And like all these little minute distractions all at the end of the day, and you get to the end of the day and you go, hey, did I hit my call count or my appointment count or whatever? No, you didn't. So part of it is, hey, I'm trying something new. I got to learn this new thing I'm doing. And the other part of it for a lot of people is like, you really just didn't work. You didn't work as efficiently enough and productively enough as you planned on it. Right. So that's just a big one with just telesales. It could be lead flow. Right. So, you're running some internet leads, and right. And you're doing your thing, and you go, man, I want to spend less time dialing. So I heard that there's these secret leads over here, right? And I've talked to some agents. They're like, every single week they're doing new leads, right? This week it's internet leads, next week it's happy agent, then it's game time, then it's mortgage, then it's live transfers. And like, you can never really get a good flow in a system. And in business, it's all about, right? If you want to know, if I call up Jamie and I go, hey, Jamie, I need some help, right? First thing he's going to say, if, and Jamie's definitely a great manager. So he's going to say, well, hey, what's the numbers? What are we looking at? And if I can't give him some numbers, like we were talking about some issue paid stuff today, and I'm like, well, here's this number, here's that number. But if I don't have that, like, how is he going to help me? He's not. So if you're changing so many things from week to week, month to month, how are you going to know what's actually working and what's just luck, right? You do one batch of XYZ leads this week, and maybe they turn out great. So you go, oh, those are great leads. But then the next week they don't. And really what it was you didn't work hard enough. You didn't, you only called through one time. You didn't text them. You had a bad attitude. Something was going on in your personal life, and you were in your head, like all these things. So, you have to do one thing, just, get your one way of doing things for a long enough period of time. And then when it starts working, if you want to tweak something, okay, this week we'll add, a couple of telesales in for my in-home, or we'll add a couple of these other leads to see how they go. And you make little tweaks, right? So if something doesn't work, you just kind of take it out, and then you're left with some more things that work. And maybe, next month you add something else in, because you don't want to, if it's working, you don't want to mess it up. You don't want to break it, right? You don't want to go from 30 families a month down to 15 just so you can get back to 35, right? Stay at 30, right? And then maybe add something that you get to 38 and then 42. And next thing you know, you're like Nat DiCarlo, and you can just, sell and make your logo by yourself almost. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, Nat. You're the man.
I love it, man. So I think it's important just to note that, guys, Josh, he's been a top producer, but he's also he's changed everything multiple times. And he's not, he's humble enough to admit that he suffered for it. So at the end of the day, it's not a in the field or a telesales conversation, because they're both great. It's the fact that there were such big changes that were made all at once. So now, Josh, the compound effect of you making now little changes, talk to us about kind of your hybrid model here. Because if I look at the leaderboard and I look at, the daily sales, I would say the majority of your sales as of recently were all over the phone. So again, it's not a telesales or an in-home thing. It's how you made little changes to lead into something that works for you, and how other people can make little changes to get to the point where they figure out whether it's 100% telesales, 100% in the field, some sort of hybrid. You're doing telesales in the car. Some days you're working from home, but what does it look like now?
Yeah. So just to kind of piggyback off of what you said. Yeah. What I found was, whether it's telesales, in home, this lead, that lead, it all works, right? And there's somebody that's doing it at a extremely high level. So that's not the thing, right? So after going back and forth and, trying, telesales back this and just changing a lot of things, I said, well, okay, let me just go back to what I know I can do and do well at it, because I've done it a whole bunch, right? So I went back into the field, booking my 30 appointments a week, 35, many weeks, 40 appointments a week. Okay. That's like my 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. I know that works every single time. But then also, right, which would be kind of like a caveat, right, is you don't want to fall in love with any one kind of lead, right? You go, oh, hey, new agents will always ask this, what's the good leads? It's like, well, they don't exist. They all are kind of terrible, and they're all great at the same time. And so if you just say, I only buy instant internet leads, or only buy, whatever the lead is, then you're going to have a disappointment, because something's going to change in this world, right?
What's it like buying instant internet leads in Atlanta?
It's awesome. Well, number one, it's awesome until just something changes, right? They run a 4-day sale, and then, or, my first 3 months, I issue paid 100. I protected 100 families my first 3 months, only running instant leads in the field. It was great. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is cool. And then they put up a big office, an FFL office, like a huge one in Atlanta. And then all of a sudden they're all gone. Right. So it's like, oh, okay, well, now what? Now, I don't know if you were really asking, like, in Atlanta.
I'm asking more of, what do you do when the lead that you normally work is gone?
Okay. So
yeah, you can talk about it in Atlanta, because you got some wild stories.
Yeah. So Metro Atlanta, if anybody wants a good story to write home about, come visit me. We'll go down there. You don't know what's going to happen. We might run over a mattress in the road, might get hit by a shovel, might get bit by a dog, might step over some needles. You just never know. You just never know. But we'll start a podcast just about stories in the field. But that's the thing. So if they put up an office, if something changes, all of a sudden your favorite lead type is gone. And it sounds simple enough. You go, oh, you just buy, let's say, some 1-month-old leads. But if you have it built up in your mind that the instant internet leads are the end all be all, then you kind of have this funky thing going on in your head where, oh, now I have to call the lesser leads. But they're really not, right? Josh and I on here, we're talking about they're about the same. They're pretty good. And there's people out there that are selling 50, 60, 70 families a month on those leads, right? Or let's say for any of the folks that are like, it's direct mail mortgage all the way. Well, then, there's a recession and people aren't buying homes, and all of a sudden your mortgage, leads dry up for a couple of weeks, right? You never know what's going to happen. So if you get so stuck on this one way of doing things, and I'm never going to look at, all the other stuff, then you might find yourself, and this is just business in general, you're going to find yourself, you wake up one day and you get caught with your pants down, and you got to figure it out. And you don't want to figure it out when you're losing money. You want to figure it out when you're ahead. So I don't know if you want to keep going on that or move to something different.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. I think that's powerful. The ability to pivot. I think that is a powerful skill in business, whether it's in our business or in any other business. I had a digital marketing business before this, and we had a software that was 100% dependent on Instagram. Then one day Instagram decided to change their terms and agreements, and we went from having 500 clients paying a couple $100s a month for a software to 0 clients paying a couple $100s a month, because our software stopped working when Instagram changed one thing. So you have to have the ability to pivot. You have to have the ability to be able to, still move forward with a plan, and be able to, obviously continue to write business in this, scenario, working other leads. There was, a lot of the mail houses, they come out of Texas, believe it or not. And a couple of years ago, there's a giant ice storm. And guess what? No mail was going out all around the country, and nobody had their direct mail. So they had to pivot into, at this time, it was Facebook final expense leads, because these were the new thing. There used to only be direct mail. And then they came out with Facebook final expense, and people were very resistant to it. And then they were forced to adapt. And then instant internet leads came out, same exact thing. They're forced to adapt. And, now with the pandemic, we were forced to adapt to telesales, and now it's become a way of life for some people. So just want to make sure that's clear. So
yeah. So, well, I started you asked me a question. I half answered it about the transition. So went back into the field, was 100% in the field. And again, I wanted to start, making sure I had all these diversified leads. For example, it started locking out more counties and picking up more mortgage. Oh, like there was nothing really local, because, all the good spots in Atlanta were kind of taken up. So that forced me to go South Georgia, different states. And so started picking those up. But again, the mortgage industry as a whole is kind of down. People aren't buying as much. So those would sprinkle in, and they're so far away. These are 4 hours away, a state away, half a country away. So I'm like, well, how am I going to do those on telesale if I'm out in the field? And then you start doing this back and forth thing going, okay, well, maybe I'll do this day in the field, this day on telesales. I can't multitask. I'm terrible at that. Right. So like if I try to do that, I would end up doing telesales today, then I wouldn't have enough appointments in the field. And then you're driving around Atlanta, dodging stuff, and you have 3 appointments, and that's just terrible. Right. So what I did, as I said, I'm going to book all my stuff in the home, right? Like I normally would. I dial on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, dial on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The other thing, like I said, I personally do not like one call, one closes. It messes with my day. I don't know where I'm going to be. I can't compartmentalize the activities of the business, right? I'm dialing right now, and then I'm doing, appointments, and then I'm doing the next thing, and then I'm doing the next thing like that. I'm just a simple guy. I'm a caveman, right? So I would just schedule all my in-homes, and then when I would get like a mortgage lead or something that I couldn't drive to, I would just schedule like an appointment in my little time slot in between my in-homes. And I would schedule them a little bit closer. So let's say, like I have, I don't book, when I book times for people, I don't book them when they're available. I book them in a slot that I've already pre-selected, right? So it's like when I'm running at home, it's like 8 a.m., 9:30, 11:15, 1 o'clock, 2:45, 4:30, let's see, 6:45 and 8 p.m. Like that's my time slots, and you fit in the time slot. But if it's telesale, obviously I don't have to drive anywhere. I can fit a couple extra in there, right? So let's say, I don't have I don't have anything at 1 o'clock, right? So I'll book maybe 2 telesales in there, and it's simple, right? People are like, how do you do that? Well, I don't, I would just pull off into either a racetrack or a Quick Trip, because that's the 2, nice gas stations around Atlanta. And I'd sit there and I'd have my little iPad and I would rock a telesale. And what happened was I started getting pretty, like really, really confident, closing 80 or 90%. At this point, I close just as much on telesales as I do in the home at this point. Now that wasn't the case, but now it's the case. So then the next evolution happened, right? Again, some things changed. They had some lead sales. I don't know what was going on in the lead world. All of a sudden, there's very few leads in Atlanta, right? There's no 1, 2, 3 month old mortgage leads, because those are all the good ones, right? That, the quote unquote, the good ones that people like to, pick up from all the way, all around the country. The instant leads, they ran a big sale, so there was none of those available, right? And so literally the only leads there were like some like 1 and 3 month, which is fine, but like, again, I don't want to rely on one kind of lead. So like, what are my other options? So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to like piece together some leads to just do telesales until something changes. So next thing I know, I'm doing some whatever little mail mortgage I have. So I had that coming in. If anybody's ever worked the game time, non-med term, I had a bunch of those. And then in my dead downtime, if I didn't have an appointment or whatever, I'd turn on live transfers. So if you look at my weeks, it's like I'm selling on like 4 or 5 different lead types. And so now over the last 2 weeks, it's kind of flipped where I've done almost all telesales, and then I'll run some in-homes on Saturdays because I don't want to give that up. I like it, and Saturday's a good day to run it in home. So, but now since I kind of just slowly made that transition the last 2 weeks, just this week coming back from our retreat, I was able to help 20 families very comfortably, wasn't out of my element, didn't feel like I was like just, chasing it down. It was nice, and it felt good, I guess.
I love it, man. I love it. So let's kind of transition. I know you took some notes. What is something else, a lesson, a mistake, something that you've learned, that you've experienced, that you feel like you can impart onto these people?
Yeah, a few things. I would say the next like big thing, and there's like some like mechanical things, but there's a lot of mindset things that we slip into that we don't know that we're doing it until we're looking at our bank accounts or our submit boards or issue paid boards, and we're going, oh shit. Right. And it's getting overconfident. This is like a salesperson's worst nightmare. You get overconfident, right? And you can get, and this can creep in a lot of ways. And again, I've done this for a long, long time, and I know that I'm susceptible to it. And I remember like that really big month I had, we submitted over 100 families personally. And I remember I'm going in homes, and all of a sudden I came out of this home. I said, Josh, you're doing it. You're getting overconfident, because I was skipping steps. I was so confident walking in, I can close anybody, that if I looked at my inventory sheet, I didn't fill it all out, or maybe like when I was setting the table, I got a little sloppy, or, I didn't make sure the spouse was there. So I set on a couple of one-leggers, these little types of little tiny things that all, that can lead to something's going to change, right? Let's say you get a little overconfident. So what happens when you get overconfident, right? You stop making as many calls as you normally do, because you can close anybody anywhere, right? Or maybe you're part-time and your goal is to transition into full-time, but you just had a big week and you made more money this week than you normally do on your job in a month. And you're like, oh, I'm good. I got some room. And so next week, you don't work as hard as you did this week. So then what happens, right? Maybe you have a chargeback. Maybe something happens in your personal life and your car breaks down, or somebody gets sick, or you take a vacation because you've been doing pretty well. We get paid just ridiculous here. So you go take a vacation. You're like, I deserve some time off. I've been working hard. You come back from whatever that thing is, and you come back to a chargeback, because that's going to happen. Maybe you spend a little too much money, so you don't have enough for your lead bill. And then you come back, or you get in your head, because all of a sudden you're at the top of the mountain, you're closing everybody's booking with you, till all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I had a bad dial day. I only booked, my goal is 15, I booked 10. That's not even a full schedule. And then you go and you get a couple extra no-shows. Now it's bound to happens to the best of us. One time I saw, I think this is great. Nat DiCarlo, you probably don't remember this, but there was a day a couple months ago, you helped 8 families that day. And I remember somebody was like, "Nat, man, you're on fire. You're crushing it. You're killing it." And he's like, "Well, not really. I had 17 appointments today. So not that great." It's like, you have a day like that where, yeah, you helped 8 families, but you put the time and the resources to have 17 appointments. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, now you're on the back foot, right? Now that bad dial day goes into 2 bad dial days. Now you got 5 think about it, and you didn't sell anything that day. Now you're wondering if you can sell ever again, and you're in the doom loop. Or worse yet, you go out and you stack policies, you stack 5 policies in one home on 5 carriers, and you get a chargeback on every single carrier. Now you have you have a chargeback with Americo, and Prosperity, and Foresters, and you never write Foresters. Now you got this $2,000 chargeback. You're like, I'm going to go out of my way to write Foresters when I never do. So now every time you go in a home, instead of, hey, I'm going to protect this family, you're like, I'm going to write Foresters. Like all this weird stuff that happens. So what do you do about that, right? The shirt is humble and hungry for a reason. Like Sean Mike figured that one out a long time ago, made the shirt. And so, you have to do the things that got you there, right? You have to do the things that you're not too good to do, right? Which be on this call every week. Like, this is my call, and I'm going to learn something every single week. And if you don't learn something, it's not the speaker's fault, it's your fault, because you can either learn what to do better, or you can learn what not to do in some cases. But every week you can learn something. It's reaching out to people that are qualified to give you advice. Now, this is another tip, right? Especially if you're not in that top producer status. What we normally do is we go to somebody else that's on our level, and it sounds like complaining. The leads don't work. These people don't buy insurance. The carriers don't want to pay us. it got stuck in underwriting. My manager's not as available as he should be, blah, 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 blah. But you go somebody to that, so I had this past month, I didn't issue a high percentage of what I wrote. I was upset about that. So I reached out to a guy because I come to the calls and I'm around the culture. I'm going to the events. I knew who he was. I knew he would take my call, right? Reached out to him, and he had a month where he sold like 97 families and issued like 87 families, something ridiculous like that. I'm like, hey, what do you do? How do I fix this? And he gave me a couple things, right? He's qualified. I'm not going to go to somebody who, sells 10 families a month and ask them about it. It's just, they're not going to be able to help me. So
That's good. I think that's a good transition here, because we also had a deep conversation. I feel like we have this conversation every week. There's a couple of carriers that we have that actually get people paid. So talk to me about the times that you decided, I'm going to get really fancy with this, and I'm going to sell the crazy fully underwritten product because it sounds cool. Talk about just some of the things you've experienced with that and what it looks like to actually, how do we actually issue business and actually get paid? I think that's important, because we have a couple carriers that get us paid quick. And then we look at the comp grid and go, well, this carrier pays me 3% more, so I'm going to write that carrier. But little do you know, that carrier, everything gets stuck in underwriting. But we write that carrier because we think we're smarter than our manager, who says, hey, write this product. And we go, well, I'm actually going to write this product for XYZ reason. Mike said it right there: fancy fails, simple scales. So give me your perspective on that.
yeah. So a couple things, right? It's common when you start that we're all here. Yes, we want to make a lot of money, but we want to help people, right? You don't get into life insurance sales if you don't want to help people. It's, especially the way we're set up, it's too difficult not to A, make a lot of money, and B, actually make a difference in people, right? Because you're dealing with just so much, and crazy people, and people, thanking you and crying and cussing you out and all everywhere in between. So if you don't really want to help people, this is not the place for you. So it's a normal thing to go, hey, well, I'm just going to write whatever the cheapest thing is for my client. You do that for two reasons. One, so you kind of have this fear inside of, if I don't show them the cheapest thing, I'm not going to get the sale. So that's selfish. And then two, well, I just want to give them the cheapest thing. Well, the cheapest thing isn't the best thing, right? And I remember early on, Jamie, you were telling me, write America, write this. I'm like, why does he keep telling me to write that? And I figured it out. And so that's one thing. I'll come back to that. And the other thing is, you see these big policies getting written, these IULs and all this big numbers. And you go, well, that's what I want to do. I want to write the big numbers. Well, what you don't hear is a lot of times those big numbers, they don't issue, right? It's usually the 72-year-old doctor that has a laundry list of medications, and it ends up not issuing, right? Like that's what happens. So, again, going back to that time where I was writing a lot of business, we got a lot of carriers here. If you look the spread of where I placed my business, it was like all over the place, right? Like this one I'm writing AMAM, the next one I'm writing Aetna, and then we're doing, some fully underwritten IUL stuff, and they're big policies, and it looks really cool on the submit boards. And yes, we were issuing more than maybe, the next guy, but what really made me mad was I that particular month, I think, I was like number one on the boards. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and say that. And I was writing more than you, Mike, and Peter. But you guys were issuing at least as much as I was. And when came bonus time for Americo, you guys got an Americo bonus and I didn't. And I was so upset. And then, you're trying to build a business, right? So you're investing in staff and marketing and all this stuff. So cash flow is important. And I'm just, the point is, the best policy is the one that issues and pays when the client dies. And then the number one that pays you today, because if you run out of cash flow and you're not in the business, now you can no longer help clients. And so I'm getting frustrated and I go, okay, when was I the most profitable, right? When was life the best where like money's flying into my bank account and, Michelle, my wife, is happy, right? And that is when I look back and like everything I wrote was like a Miracle and Mu Accidental. It's like Miracle Mu Accidental, Miracle Mu Accidental. Like it's like everything was that. And what would we know about both of those carriers, right? Well, Mu Accidentals, it's good. There is no underwriting. It issues, it pays the next day. And Americo is on the spot, instant decision, and it essentially pays you the next day. So it's like, well, why wouldn't you do that? You leave the phone call, you leave the house, they're protected. You don't have to come back. You don't have to have them sign a form or do a call or check it in 3 days or a week to see if they got approved and call them back. You leave knowing they are. And when you write Americo or Mu Accidental, it is as good as money in the bank. Simple. So now, if you look at what I write, it's like a couple carriers. We keep it all right here. Of course, there's some exceptions once in a while, but it's like 3 or 4 things, and that's it. So, chargebacks, manage those, not a problem.
Totally. And I think that like when you start getting to higher levels, you start getting into these things about like conversations about vice president bonus, all these different things. And you hear this stuff about, oh, this carrier is 100% bonusable premium and this one's 50% bonusable premium. Why is that? Well, guys, at the end of the day, you just got to use your brain a little bit here. Just like we want to get paid fast, so does corporate. They can pay out more bonuses on carriers that pay out quicker. So I'm not going to sit here and preach about what you should write or what you shouldn't write. There's a handful of really good carriers. I'll tell you the carriers that I write. There's some other carriers that obviously pay out just as quick. But for me, I try to keep it condensed to like 4 or 5 carriers. I've got Americo, Mutual of Omaha, Prosperity, American Amicable, and AIG. I can get just about everybody covered with those products. And some of you guys are like, well, what about that carrier? I looked at the comp grid. They pay a higher commission. Okay, well, some of those carriers, a lot of stuff gets stuck. Things get approved, or if you ever got the yellow circle, you know what app I'm talking about without mentioning their name. The yellow circle is the circle of death, where it takes 3-4 weeks for something to issue, and it's just or it gets declined. So I try to stay away from that as much as possible, and I try to write carriers that I know are going to get instant decisions, because at the end of the day, it's not just about what I get paid. It's about getting the client protected today. I think that's very important. So I could throw something up and I could just throw a Hail Mary out there, hoping that maybe they get approved. And in a couple of weeks, I have to sign a delivery receipt and all these different things that maybe is never going to, go. Or I know that the client was protected today. How many of you guys have written that Hail Mary policy, but then also said, you know what? I'm also going to write you up an accidental and something very simple, a simplified issue policy, because we need to make sure you have something in that's going to protect you today. And if you end up getting that fully underwritten policy, great, go for it. You can do whatever you want with the simplified issue later, but I can't leave this house without you being protected. I can't get off this phone call without you actually being protected today. Because what happens if you die during the underwriting process of the fully underwritten? What happens? Mm-hmm. So how many of you guys are doing that? Or are you just throwing up a Hail Mary hoping that they get it? So instant decision is incredible. Any product that has an instant decision, you should be writing it. So that'll be the end of that. What's the next thing that you've learned, Josh?
I guess this would be like getting into some nitty gritty stuff. One of the things, I'll say 2 things. Number one is we kind of mentioned it earlier, knowing your numbers, and that could be a lot of things, right? That could be, hey, how many dials am I making? How many, what's my sales? How many appointments? What's my issue paid? But even more so, like, I think it's really simple, or easy, I should say, to when you get into this, to just go, okay, well, FFL is doing all these things for me, right? Hey, Jamie, he has his staff and they do this and they do that. And the carriers, they do all that. So all I have to do is just go throw business in the system and everything's going to be good to go. And the truth of the matter is, like, there's a lot of stuff on the back end, right? You're always getting emails and forms from the carriers to do this, that. That's, this policy got hung up or that policy got hung up. Again, that's why you want to write stuff that's in decision, or maybe somebody got a decline, and just staying on top of that and knowing like what's getting issued and what's not. And you can overcorrect on this, right? You can overcorrect and just sit and like not go out and protect people and just, watch your computer. But on the other hand, what you can do, and I think this is probably better to err on this side, is you're just so busy, flinging in business that all of a sudden you start looking, you go, okay, my profitability is getting messed with, I'm issuing less than I could be. So like knowing what's going on and treating this like a business, right? You wouldn't have things going on in your business and employees doing this and all that and not looking at it daily, weekly, right? So even if you're part-time, you have to treat this like it's your job, like it's your business. And then the other part about that, and something that I'm very bad at, is just being unorganized, right? So, I went out really quickly and got a virtual assistant to help with all this stuff. And she's been amazing, but still like, if that's something that you struggle with, like talk to people. Like I know early on, I was like, hey, Jamie, what do you use for this? Now, yeah, I could go and recreate my own deal. But again, I'm not organized. So whatever I create, it's going to be trash. Right. So like, let me figure out what Jamie's using. And just this past weekend, right? Like, my space I had papers everywhere. And then like I had some, a bunch of declines I had to rewrite. And then I have like these agents that I have to call and that thing that I need to do and a laundry list of line items. Part of that is just, hey, that's how the business goes. You're never going to get the to-do list done, or else you would just, I guess, win in business and you would be Elon Musk or whatever else. I don't know. But if you have no system to organize that, all of a sudden, you'll see it in your bank account, right? Like you're like, man, I'm spending this, I'm working all the time. This is happening. Why am I not like netting more money? And then you start looking, you go, oh, okay, well, you got sloppy in your finances, or you overspent on leads and you didn't, work them all, or you forgot about them, or you had some new agents start and they didn't actually get started because you didn't call them and make sure they got their first day set up, or, just manifests itself in these different ways. So again, that's my thing. That might not be your thing. That's why I have, a virtual assistant and my wife. Those two individuals are extremely organized, and I'm a caveman. So that's something I have to work on.
I love it. Yeah, organization is key, guys. Definitely, if you're not organized, look to somebody that is, or someone that you at least think is, and find out if they're organized, and then do what they're doing. All right, what else?
Those were the big things, Jamie. Those were the big things. But I think again, the more the dangerous stuff is the mindset, right? Now, if we want to talk about things that a new agent what would hinder you, I was actually doing an interview with a new agent, or onboarding, I should say. And she asked me, she goes, what are some of the things that, the pitfalls that new agents, find themselves in that kind of hold them back? And I said, well, it's none of the mechanical stuff. It's not a phone script, right? It's not product knowledge. She's like, yeah, I want to know about product knowledge. It's for sure not product knowledge. I'll promise you. It's all of the mindset stuff, right? So it's the mindset around, leads, right? So a thing that I wrestled with in the beginning was, hey, did these people really fill it out? Or, because they're going to tell you that they didn't. And you can choose to believe that. And even if you know not to believe that, after you got hung up on 10 times and it's like 2:30 and you're getting kind of tired, and maybe you had too much, too big of a lunch, and you got that 3 o'clock, your eyes are starting to roll back in your head. You're like, maybe they didn't fill it out. Right. So like, that's a mindset around leads that will, you're going to go take a break. You're not going to dial a lead. So like, that's a big one.
I want to make sure I just comment on this. I had that exact feeling today, and I've been in this for 2+ years, and I had that exact same feeling today. Guess what? Direct mail didn't pan out this week at all. I had like 2 leads come in for the entire week. So been dialing instant internet leads. Had a couple agents who've been struggling with instance. I bought a pack myself, and guess what? The first 48 calls, I was getting my butt kicked. Nobody wanted to talk to me. Nobody was answering. And then guess what? I decided to stick through it. And then here comes all the appointments because I decided to stick through it. And honestly, I was feeling pretty negative through the beginning of it. I was like, man, did these people really not fill it out? I'm like starting to question the leads. I'm like, what exactly do you think that you filled out or didn't fill out? Like trying to like investigate what happened. And even I found myself in that situation, but then I kept going and I kind of changed my tone. I went and I kind of took a breather and I came right back and I hit the reset button. I said, no, they did fill out these leads. And then guess what? I came in with a completely different attitude and I started booking up my internet leads like crazy. And, my first 48, I got my butt kicked. And then the next 40 or so, I ended up booking like 7 or 8 appointments on, filling in all the gaps that I needed, to fill in these next couple of days. So, I guys, it happens to all of us. Like even just today, I preach to people all day why a lead's a lead. And then today I was like, is a lead a lead? Like this lead kind of sucks. Josh said it earlier. He's like, they all kind of suck. Guys, in sales, a lead is a lead. It's not a sale. Like if we were buying sales, everyone would do this. There's a reason why most people quit. A lead is an opportunity. Okay. And at the end of the day, I look at it as if I buy a batch of leads, and yes, of course, I want to book 15 to 18 appointments. That's of course what I want. That should be the goal. I'm going to dial my face off and get as close as possible or above that as I possibly can. But how many of us have just gotten kicked in the stomach on a batch of leads? You buy the biggest batch of leads you've ever bought before, and you're just like, how did I only get 2 appointments off of that? What the heck? But the person who has the right mindset, they go, I can squeeze this batch, and I know the skill set that can be built here. If I just go help 1 family, 2 families, I get another shot. And I think that's so important, is that, yes, there are purchases where you get your butt kicked. Does that mean that all the leads are bad? No. You happen to have a bad dial day. Everybody has a bad dial day. Everybody's bought what they consider to be a bad batch of leads. But also, if Josh and I were sitting there together and we just switched stacks, and I said, all right, you dial the stack that I just got my ass kicked on, Josh might go book 15 appointments off my stack. You have no idea.
I told you about this. I worked through a batch of my leads, and then while we were in Arizona, I gave some of the leads to 2 different agents. Now I'd already worked these leads, and one agent protected 5 families and the other protected 4 families on a batch that I'd already gone through. So, there you go. Here's something else, and maybe you can kind of like help me articulate this idea, Jamie, because like every time I try to say it, it just doesn't come out right. So it's a conversation about spending money, right? Like that was what attracted me to this business, because again, I was used to, you go out, you pound the pavement, so to speak, and you spend 80% of your time building up interest and 20% of your time in front of clients. And so this was different. I'm like, hey, we can go out and just literally purchase interest. I'm like, I'm all in for that. And so a lot of people, they come in, and again, you can be on 2 ends of the spectrum. You can be the person that just blows all their money, and they'll go out and buy a couple $1,000s worth of leads, but then they don't actually work hard enough to get the results from those leads. Right? Don't be that person. But then you get a lot of people, maybe they've never been in business. They go, well, okay, they say I should, spend X amount, $500, $1,000 in leads or whatever, but I'm just going to spend a little bit and I'll get a little bit. And if that goes well, then I'll spend a little bit more. And that never works. And then these folks never get out of the gate. And there's like a minimum threshold, right? So like, agent on my team, and you'll figure out who she is real quick, Jamie, but right. So she was spending like $2,000 a month, and she was helping like 8 to 10 families a month. And then she had she kept spending the 2 and protected like 20 families a couple months in a row. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like really, really good. That's like a huge ROI. But then when she went back to protecting 8 or 10 families a month, and all of a sudden you get some chargebacks, and like she was not doing well financially, right? And so why is that? It's like, well, you got to figure all the things, right? It's like, okay, you got the lead cost, and then, like you issue what you issue, but let's say some of it doesn't pay, right? Like if you're like Mike Curry and you go write a huge policy, but there's a max cap for like $3,000, right? So maybe that's a part of it. Maybe you get a charge back, so you minus that. right? Then you got some personal expenses, so you minus that, and all of a sudden, what that 8 looked pretty good, you're like, don't have any money at the end of the month. And so the solution is spend more money is the solution. But in your head, you're like, well, how do I spend more when I'm not making more? And it's like, hey, welcome to entrepreneurism.
That's it right there. I mean, the fear to spend on leads. Now, here's a question I have for you, Josh. So let's say you're right now, you go and you spend $1,000 on brand new internet leads and you get your butt kicked on those internet leads. What do you do?
I just buy more.
So now how do you say that to a new agent who, has protected some families, hasn't quite figured it out, and they're like, well, I just spent $1,000 on leads and they were the meanest people I've ever talked to in my entire life, and everybody was cussing me out, and it's like the mindset of like, how do you smack the reset button and do it again? Because there's a confidence now in a top producers learn the skill set that they can protect families, that they like, how redeeming is this business that you can have a bad week, that you can be the guy who, gets his butt kicked on setting appointments, and you go from 18 appointments last week to crap, I only set 3 appointments on each dial day and I had 6 appointments and only sat with 2, and then the next week you come right back and maybe you have an average week, but you end up protecting, more families than the previous 2 weeks combined. It's such a redeeming business. So, I mean, what would you say to somebody who maybe they say, well, I tried that and I got my butt kicked, and now they have a fear? I mean, because the same agent you're talking about who was afraid to, up their ROI, they had a couple of times where they spent the most money they ever spent on leads and got their butt kicked, but then also had future weeks where they made it all back. So, I mean, what's your advice to someone who's trying to kind of figure that out?
Yeah. So, two parts of that. Like, you asked me what I would do, and it's like, Josh, if I was my last $1,000 and I had to pay rent, I would not pay rent. I would go buy leads, because I know that, if I pay rent, then I have no money. I shot my business in the head and I'm out of business and I don't have rent for next month. Right. So like, I'm going to do that. Now for the person, maybe you're not there yet. 99.9% of the time, if that happens, you're not doing absolutely everything. You're not doing everything that you could do to get the results out of those leads. Something is going wrong, right? And quite often it's, hey, you're not on live dials, or you're not, it doesn't need to be live dials, but you're not around other people, whether it be in an office, next to them, on live dials, that are winning, right? So I had an agent, probably the one we're talking about. Because she was on live dials, right? Now she was struggling. Because she was on live dials, she calls me and she goes, I think I need to change my script. Now, this person has set hundreds of appointments. It was for sure not her script. It's the same one that we all use. We all say about the same thing. But she started calling and she's on live dials, and I go, hey, I know what it is. It's your tonality. It's all wrong. You sound all off, right? And so she was able to change that, and that changed her results immediately. So guaranteed, it's like, if I'm not, looking at the top producers here, if you look at Nat DiCarlo, Mike Curry, Logan O'Brien, Jamie, like if you look at these guys, if they wrote out a list of the things that they have to do, if you said not what, the FFL system is, like, what does Jamie have to do to make sure he, is a, 30, 40, 50 family a month kind of guy, like, which he's going to say things like, I got to make sure I get my leads the night before. I got to be organized. I got to make sure I'm dialing by a certain time, just so I don't feel like I'm in front of the day. The day's not in front of me. I got to dial it on live dial. Like for me, like if I'm not on live dials, like even if no one's on, I got Zoom up dialing. I don't know. It's just ingrained in me at this point. Right. So like, that's a thing, and there's all these little things that we all do to make sure we're in peak performance. And for sure, if you're not having those results, you're not doing them, right? So if you call up to your manager and go, hey, Jamie, like, hey, these leads aren't working, like he can be nice and go, I'm so sorry about that. Or he can go, hey, listen, I have to do all these things and you're not doing them. So like, I don't, this sounds bad, but like, if you're brand new, I'm not going to say me, Jamie Chirio is a better salesperson in life insurance than you are. Agreed. Okay. That's proven, he's got the track record. So why would you think that you don't have to do all the little things that he's got to do to produce at a high level? That's just arrogant, right? And so if you're doing all of those things, right, you're on live dials, you're up early, you have them organized, you keep track of your numbers, or if you're not on live dials, record yourself and send it to somebody, like all these different things. If you're doing every single one of them, then you can start to go, okay, well, maybe there's something I need to change and I'm going to ask for help, right? But we all have an ego. We don't ask for help because we think we got it figured out. Like, I don't know, maybe that's social media, I don't know where it comes from, but like, that's it. All right. So just, can't have an ego, humble and hungry. You hear it again and again and again.
So quick speed round before we jump off of here. If I tell you, Josh, you got to beat up these leads to get some ROI, what are you doing to beat up the leads just to get anything? You can just get any little piece of juice that's left in these leads. What are you doing? What you talked about, they would be willing to do anything to a stack of leads. And it's like a top producer, they're doing things to get a hold of these leads that maybe you're not willing to do. So I mean, what are some of those things that you can do? It's not just going out and door knocking, but dial patterns, texting, like what are you doing at the end of the day? If you're like, I need to get a hold of these leads, I gotta get something out of this.
Well, first things first, right? Let's say you have 100 internet leads. All right. First things first is, can you make 900 dials today? I mean, plenty of people can do it. Why 900 on 100 leads? Well, it's triple dial them in the morning, right? Go grab some water, triple dial them in the afternoon, triple dial them in the evening. Now it's even more than that, right? For every 10 to 15 leads that you go through, if you're not getting answers, there's this thing called, spam likely. It's a thing. We got to deal with it. It is what it is. I don't have a perfect solution for it, right? So I'm going to call to make sure my number's not spam. You have to call somebody with AT&T and Verizon. So I'll call like my wife who's got AT&T. I'll call somebody else who has Verizon. Make sure throughout the day my number's not spam, right? And a lot of times if I'm going through that, people aren't answering, that's it. So like, that's going to be a thing, right? So I'm going to do that 3 times, right? The next day I'm going to dial them again, because if I didn't get enough out of them, I'm going to dial them again. And you say, well, people have a thing. Well, if I've called them a couple times, then they've already, they're used up. Well, I just told you they're not. People on my team just did that. So I'm going to dial them again. Then I'm going to text them, right? You can either, text them individually. You can use TurboText, but you're going to text every single one of them. Matt Goodrich did this to me today. I thought this was like, I've heard about this, but I've never seen it happen. So he calls me and it pops up on my phone, Matt Goodrich. It's like, well, hey, Matt, I didn't know I had your number in my phone. He goes, you don't. I texted you, hey, it's Matt Goodrich, as I was calling you, and it popped up my phone, Matt Goodrich. I was like, okay, that's pretty slick. So like, use something like that, right? For the ones that you don't have, like, it's like a bad number, or you set an appointment and the address is wrong, right? True People Search or Fast People Search, right? And then of course, door knocking. I've even heard of some people looking people up on Facebook. Now I haven't tried that one, but like, if you had to do everything, if it's Thursday and I need some money by Wednesday, like, yeah, try it all, right? And the morning and the evening, right? If you're not dialing from 8 a.m., like 7:45 a.m. to 10 a.m. your time, you're just missing the boat, right? If you're getting started at 12:30, right? That's somebody's been at their job just long enough to hate you, right? And then, that doesn't mean you should not dial in the afternoon, because you're going to get somebody, they're at home, watching soaps, or maybe they're on lunch, or maybe they work from home. And then that evening time after 5, if you're not going 5 to 8, and I know it's dinner time, but if you got to do everything that you got to do, like, wouldn't you take those times to dial?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great thing to end on, because at the end of the day, when I was brand new, so I just want to make sure this is very clear. So now my goal is to be done dialing by 1 o'clock. That's my goal. So I can focus on some business building activities. Does that happen? It didn't even happen today, but that's my goal. And a lot of the times it does happen. But I can't tell you how many times I had to have conversations with my family and say, guys, 4 to 8 o'clock p.m. is the golden couple of hours. Because if I got my butt kicked all day, I can't tell you how many times I've run into 4 or 5 o'clock with 3 appointments, and then out of nowhere booked like 11 appointments in 3 hours. I can't tell you how many times that happened. So some of y'all, you value your time in the evening with your family, you value your dinner time with everybody. I get that, guys. It literally eats me up inside to miss dinner and bedtime, with my kid, with my family. But at the end of the day, we made 19 grand in 2019. Okay. So it's for me, sacrifice. Mike said it right there. Sacrifice. You got to sacrifice a couple of things. And if it was, I'm going to do whatever it takes, because some of y'all, you're actually really, really good at selling insurance. Like, you're really good, like amazing, but you can't set enough appointments. You're amazing at selling insurance, but you just don't set enough appointments. And they go, well, I need help with my closing ratio. I'm like, dude, no, you don't. You're closing like 6 out of 10 of every single person you sit with. The problem is you only sat with 5 people this week. So you only helped 3 families. What if you sat with 20? You'd help 12 and you'd be on the top of the leaderboard. So it's just like, what does it take? So for me, it's like, appointments are everything. I know I'm good at selling insurance. I try to be humble, but in this regard, I know I'm good at it because I've sat with that many people. So guess what? Sometimes dial day is a freaking battle. It is a battle of battles. There's some days we come in and you just kick ass. You're like, I'm done at 10 o'clock. I got all my dials done. But there's some days where you are literally battling until 8, 9 o'clock. If you haven't dialed from 8 to 9 p.m., you haven't really dialed. Okay, we talk about 5 to 8, but if you haven't gone till 9, you don't want it bad enough. So for me, I look at it as whatever it takes, because guess what? Those times that I've stayed up late and dialed a little bit longer, those times that I got in the car in between appointments and I dialed a few more times, and I set those extra couple appointments when I didn't want to be dialing, sometimes those were the appointments that saved my entire week. I can't tell you how many times I didn't get enough appointments for my Tuesday, Wednesday. I had a gap on Tuesday, and I set 3 more appointments for Wednesday. And then I look back and it didn't sell anything on Tuesday, Wednesday, except those 3 appointments that I set in the car. So it's like, how bad do you want it? I think that's the biggest thing. We can teach you all the different skill sets. We can teach you all the tips and tricks. We can teach you everything that we do. But if you guys can't get the mindset right and you don't have the why down, like, how bad do you want it? Because this can change your life financially forever. It can change everything. Learning this skill set can literally change everything for your family. So at the end of the day, what would you be willing to do to learn this skill set? Because you don't deserve to get done dialing the phone at 1 p.m. until you've dialed at 9 p.m. I'm sorry to say that. You don't deserve to get done early until you put in the reps. I got a stack of dial trackers to the left of this computer right now that are like, it's like 4 inches thick at this point, with hundreds of thousands of dials. I've sat with over 2,000 appointments. So if I've sat with over 2,000 appointments, how many times do you think someone's told me I didn't fill it out? Like, how many times? It literally, like, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of times. But it doesn't matter, because how many people have allowed me to sit with them? A lot. And that's what it takes. So I love that, Mike. That's a great way to end this call. Becoming great has to be a priority. That's fantastic. So Josh, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us, man. Learned so much. Everybody, if you got something good out of this, drop a JL in the comments for Josh Lockhart. Everybody have an amazing night.